My name is Paria Hassouri. I'm a pediatrician and a mother of three and a transgender rights activist and a writer. And I currently live and practice in Los Angeles. So in May of 2017, one of my children came out as transgender, and she was born designated male at birth. And at 13 and a half, she told her father and I that she is not a boy and that she is a girl. And when this happened and when she told us this, we were completely blindsided by this information. And I had already been a practicing pediatrician for 15 years and thought that this was something that I would have known about my child. And I really did not have any clue that this was her true gender identity. And so that really changed the course of what happened in our family over the next couple of years. And it really took about a year and a half for us to really fully accept what had happened in our family and what she was telling us. And through this process, we really learned a lot about gender, how it presents, how it emerges, and changed our focus onto being as much activists and vocal as we could on the topic of transgender youth. When our daughter told us that she is transgender, naturally we asked her, what makes you think that? How do you know that? What makes you say that? And, my understanding at that time in 2017 was that transgender people know that they are trans from early childhood, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, at the latest. And so what really wasn't expecting that a 13-year-old would sit down and tell me that this is something that they had recently discovered about themselves. And she had told us that it took her, about 6 months or so to come to the realization that this was what was going on with her. About maybe a year and a half or a year before that, as her body started going through puberty and things started changing, things didn't really feel right. And so initially she thought that maybe this was about sexuality. And so she initially came out to us as bisexual. And that was something that didn't surprise us at all, because I expect that you don't necessarily know your sexuality until you start going through puberty. But I thought that gender would be something you would always know about yourself. And then she, after a little while, she realized that this wasn't really about sexuality, that wasn't fitting and it wasn't feeling right. And so she started just looking up things like, what does it mean if I don't feel right in my body? Because she didn't even know that really much about trans people or what it was that she was experiencing. And so as she started reading about trans people and their experiences and watching videos of other trans people, she really started to gather a lot of information. And it felt authentic and true, and it really resonated with her. And later on, we learned out that, and so she really spent about 6 months doing so much research on what, it means to be trans and on gender identity. And by the time she was ready to tell us, she was 100% sure that this is what was going on with her and that she couldn't, ignore it or try to continue to live as a boy. And so this is something that we later on learned when we worked with one of the therapists who specializes in gender. And that therapist told us that for a lot of trans people, they have this process of coming in before they come out. And so during this coming in period, they're gathering all this information and reading and sitting with the information and waiting, until they're sure before then they decide to come out and tell everybody else. And so by the time they've come out to you, as their parent, it seems like a shock and out of nowhere for you and very hard for you to swallow. But for them, this is something that they have been sitting with for a long time. So as we started learning more with our daughter and talking to therapists who specialize in gender identity in children, and we started to realize that, what I thought I knew about trans people was completely wrong, that it's really only about 1/3 of trans and gender diverse kids that present in early childhood. And then some others, present right around, peri-puberty age, and that 50% or more present at puberty or later. And at that time, I didn't know the stories of this 50% or more that come out and present later. Everything I had read about or seen in the media was that if you're trans, you know it from early childhood. And so when my daughter came out to me, because of my lack of knowledge, I didn't believe her. And I thought, this is just a phase, and I didn't accept it. And that led to a delay in getting her the proper care. If I could tell our story and, kind of hope that, it reaches a broader audience, then I could make a difference, for the next parent who has a child who comes out to them sort of, out of the blue. And so that was really the decision that I made that led me to go ahead and write my memoir, Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change. This memoir is really my experience as a parent who went through this. And I think, the other thing I found is that, a lot of, trans people need to hear and read trans stories. And a lot of parents of trans people need to hear and read the parent stories. And so, I just felt like it was more important to tell our story and share it, and that was sort of for the greater good than the risk it put for me and my family to really be so public about what was going on with us. So once I published my book, the feedback that I got was really incredible. I was so surprised by the number of emails that I got from families and parents, saying, I could have written this book. This is exactly where I am. This is exactly what happened to me. Thank you so much for, putting this story out there. I hadn't heard a story like ours until, you wrote this. Thank you for showing people what we go through as parents, navigating these decisions for our families. And then I noticed that I also was getting some emails from other Middle Eastern and Iranian families. And there was definitely a difference in the emails that I was getting from Iranian and Middle Eastern families compared to other emails that I was getting. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but a lot of the emails from other families was, thanks so much for writing this. This is my, experience. I could have written this. And then a lot of the emails from more Middle Eastern community were like, oh my gosh, I'm going through this and I haven't told anybody and I don't have anyone to tell. And so the difference was in reaching out to me to thank me versus reaching out to me to say, I don't have someone I can talk to about this. And it sort of really just reinforced how important it was for me to put our story out there, because I think a lot of times in Iranian communities, we really don't talk about the non-heteronormative experience publicly. And we sometimes, have shame associated with these things. And, I was never at any point ashamed of my daughter. I was in shock. I was in denial. I was in grief, but I didn't feel ashamed to have a transgender daughter. I just couldn't, accept it. But I saw that in these emails that there was a degree of feeling shamed or hesitancy to, share this information, with even their close family members. And I had shared with my close family members pretty much from the beginning. My biggest regret about my experience with my daughter is really just how I handled the situation initially. My daughter came to me with the biggest, hardest secret she had to tell me, and I didn't listen to her right away, and I shut her down, and I told her, this can't be possible. I know you better than you know yourself. And I wish that I had listened to her. For 6 to 9 months, our home, instead of it being a safe place for her where she could be who she truly was a place where she had to hide her authentic self. And no matter how much time passes, when I think about that, it really, really makes me sad. But, on the other hand of this, there's been so much positive to come out of this experience. It's made me connect with a community of other families who are going through the same thing that I would have not otherwise, ever met. And that community has really enriched all our lives. And really most rewarding is that I saw my child go from somebody who was unhappy, not social, lost, to a thriving, glowing, happy young woman. And, when you see that happen to your child, I mean, there's no denying the power of what family support and acceptance and allowing somebody to be their authentic self can do for them. This really highlights how important it is in our community that we talk about the things that we don't usually think are okay to talk about, that we attend support groups, which were tremendously helpful to me. And I feel like support groups are another thing that in our community we don't tend to do. My experience has been that in a lot of Middle Eastern or Iranian communities, family matters are private, or, a lot of things are considered private. But it's really reaching out to others who are going through the same thing and sharing your experiences with your loved ones that are going to help you get through anything in life. And so I would really love to see us and the future generation of Iranians to veer away from this shame associated with being part of the LGBTQ community, or shame associated with any sort of mental health issue, or just this idea that certain things are private and that we shouldn't share our stories. Knowledge is power. And so that's part of why it's really important that we are visible, and that we talk, and that we learn that gender is a spectrum, and that there is some fluidity and some evolution to one's gender, and that not every person's gender presents or emerges at the same time in the same way. And so I think if we all learn a little bit more about gender and learn to know this, that it can emerge and present in different ways, then when our children come to us, we're more likely to really just listen to them, to believe them, to know that they know themselves better than we know them, and to support them as best as we can. I think it's really important that we are visible, that we share positive stories, particularly when it comes to trans issues. A lot of what's in the media is really negative. And so when you see negativity in the media and you're going through something like this with your own child, it's natural to have fear for your child and wish that it wasn't that way, and it was a different way, and wish that maybe they couldn't be trans and this wasn't happening to you. And the more we talk, the more we are visible, the more we see positive examples of trans people doing incredible things, and thriving and living full lives, then the more we can accept and support our kids when this happens in our families, and not think of it as a bad thing that happens when it happens in our families. I'm really grateful for Yara Leadership Society asking me to join in spreading my message for the Pride Month. I think it's really important conversations to be having, and really I feel, particularly with the Iranian community, it's a form of giving back, and I really appreciate having my voice heard in that particular community as well.